Hello, in this demonstration I'm going to show you how to create something like this, which is basically a backdrop for a theatre production. This is going to be really large. I'm going to do this 10 meters squared. Now, you may not have a CNC that is large enough to actually cut something like that. So what I'm going to do is show you how you can split this up. And I'm going to be using ArtCAM Express with the help of a few modules. Now, this is going to be 3 separate pieces, and here you can see that they're just laid behind each other. Okay, so let me just minimize that and select ArtCAM. Now, if you take a look on the far right hand side of the screen, you can see that I have a few modules installed, and these are denoted by green ticks next to them. So you can see that I have the bitmap layers installed, vector tools, and I also have Toolpath paneling installed. And I'm going to show you how these come in handy using the basic version of ArtCAM Express to add to it. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is to create a new model. So if I go to new model, and here I can set my height and my width. Here you can see that it's already 10,000 millimeters, which is 10 meters. I can change the origin point to be any corner or the center. I'm going to set this to the bottom left. I need to set this to the bottom left in order for Toolpath paneling to function correctly. So let's set that to the bottom left. Resolution, I'm not too fussed about that because ArtCAM Express I cannot create any 3D work. Now, the only real benefit of the resolution within ArtCAM Express is what the simulation will look like. So anywhere above about 1,500 is going to be perfectly fine unless you're using it for really high-end stuff. I'm setting this at 2,000 because I have a particularly fast laptop, so I'll just set this at the maximum. Now, obviously, the larger that you set this, the slower your computer will be when it calculates things. Okay, so you can also change the units from millimeters to inches. I'm going to choose millimeters, and I'm going to select OK. This will open up a new model for me that's 10 meters by 10 meters. Okay, so in the basic version of ArtCAM Express, if you wanted to import an image into this, what you would do, you would go to File and then Open, or you can just select the image and just drag and drop that into ArtCAM and it will open that up. Now, one of the good things about having bitmap players, apart from the fact that you can open multiple images on separate layers, is the fact that you can right click, import. You can select the image that you want to import. Now, normally if you were to import an image, you would be basically constrained by the actual aspect ratio of that image. The good thing about bitmap players is that I can select this image and I can scale this. So I'm going to change that to fit. So I'm going to make sure that this fits within that 10 meter area. And then I'm going to select open. And you'll see that that's opened the image up, but it's left these white areas at the top and the bottom. That's because it's maintaining that size of 10 meters. Now, if I open up the bitmap layers, you can see that I've got Forest 1 and I've also got bitmap player here. Okay, so I can just switch back to the original bitmap player and that's empty. And there I have Forest 1. Now, if I wanted to, I can import another image. Let's say, go to import, let's select number 2. Let's fit that again and select open. And this one's a little bit different, as you can see. And then I can flick between each of the bitmap players. Okay, so on the first bitmap player, what I'm going to do is basically trace around this image. I don't want to create all of the vectors for this by hand because it would take quite a long time to actually do that. So the way that I can do that in ArtCAM Express, now this is available in the basic version of Express, is to create a bitmap to vector. So if I select bitmap to vector, and the first option at the top, it says color reduction and reduce colors. Now this is useful because ArtCAM basically traces around one color. Okay, so this is really good for example creating vectors around clip art, around logos for instance. It wouldn't be too good to create around, let's say, a photograph of someone's face, because there's too many colours involved there. You wouldn't be able to narrow those colours down and basically get all of the detail out of there. If that was the case, you would be better off just tracing around the image by hand. But for stuff like this, it's absolutely perfect. So what I'm going to do is select reduce colours, and that brings that down to 32 colours, but I need to make it so it's basically one colour that I can trace around. So I'm going to drop that down, and you'll see that the colours wash out here, and also on the image the colours will wash out. So if I bring that right the way down to 2 colours, you can see that I've lost a little bit of detail at the top here, and I can also see in the actual model that I'm losing a bit of detail. So what I need to do is bring some colour back. Okay, so let's bring that back in. Let's bring it up to, let's say 4. Okay, and then I'm just going to select OK. Now if I just zoom in here, and let's just take a look here. Now you can see here that I have the darker colour here, have a lighter colour on the inside here. Now what I'm going to do is make all of these the same colour. Now I can do that by making sure that the main colour that I want is the primary colour here, and then right clicking on the darker colour to make that the secondary colour, and then I just have this small icon above the 2 colours, and I can select that, and what that does is it links the colours together. So if I select that, you can see that it's turned all of the darker colour into the lighter colour, and you can see that I've not got that on the screen anymore. So I'm going to do the same with all of the inside areas that are lighter now. So if I right click on the lighter area, and then I'm going to link that, make sure that you take a look at the actual image on the screen, and you'll see them blend in. Okay, so you can see that that's all blended in. Now I'm able to trace around this image. Now the speckle size and the smoothness, I'm not going to go into that. Basically these are tolerances for the actual bitmap to vector. 99% of the time these work perfectly fine, so I'm just going to leave these and select create vectors. Now if I just zoom in on an area, let's say here, just drop the contrast slider bar down, you can see that it's given me all of these nice curvy vectors, and it's not following all of the pixelation from the image. Now these vectors are perfectly fine to machine just straight off as is. Okay, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to just machine these vectors. Now as I zoom out, what you'll notice is here, 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 I've got these small vectors. I don't really want them. So let's close the bitmap to vector, and I'm going to show you a quick way of just selecting those rather than just going around and selecting each piece. Now if I zoom in here, and I'm just going to measure this quickly just so I can show you the theory behind this. So if I measure that, you can see that the distance is 18.4, let's say. So what I'm going to do is round that up, let's say to 20, and I'm going to use the vector doctor to select all closed vectors smaller than, and it's in millimeters squared. So if I do 20 times 20, 400 millimeters. So if I enter 400 millimeters in there, select all closed vectors smaller than 400, and it will select that vector for me. And you can see that it's also selected this vector, and also these 2 vectors up here, which I didn't spot before. Now you can also see that there's a vector down here on the bottom left that has not been selected. So what I would need to do is up the tolerance. So let's make it twice as much as that. Let's say 800 and select all closed vectors smaller than that again. And you can see that that's selected it. So I can just press delete on the keyboard now and it will delete those vectors. So that's a quick way of just selecting vectors that are smaller than a specific size. So here you can see my outline. So what I'm going to do is just switch back to the original bitmap player just to get rid of that image, so it just doesn't show it. Now at the bottom, if I just zoom in, you can see that this is not perfectly flat, and I want it to be perfectly flat. Now the way that I can edit this is I can either create a rectangle and then just trim that off, but a real quick way to do this is to go to node editing, and this basically gives you all of the points of this particular piece. What I can do is just grab one of these nodes, move it, and I can just change the shape of this if I wanted to. Now you can see this bottom area here, it's more of a curve, and that's shown by this blue dot here. Now if I right click on this and convert the span to a line, that changes to a black node, which means that it's straight. Okay, now what I want to do is align that node with these two nodes that I have here. So let's select that node, press Ctrl on the keyboard, select the second node, and then I'm going to press Ctrl again, select the third node. Now whichever node I hover over and press Y, it will align and move all the other nodes in that direction and align them in the Y axis. So if I press Y on the keyboard here, it will move them all up to be the same size. Okay, so let's do the same quite quickly on this side. Convert the span to a line. Let's select that. Let's draw a box around these ones and press Y. And they're perfectly flat. So what I'm going to do is select all of the vectors, and then I'm just going to grab this corner here and move that down to the bottom left hand side, and you'll see that I get a snap point, which is saying that it's snapping on the corner of the model. So there you can see that that's been moved to the corner of the model. So that's the first cutout done. I want to save this onto a new vector layer. So if I select all of these vectors, I'm going to right click and move vectors to a new layer. Now if I open up the vector layers here, you can see that I have this new vector layer 2, and that's what I've just basically placed all of these vectors onto. So if I turn off the light bulb, you can see that it turns it on and off. So I'm just going to rename this and call this Forest 01, and let's change the colour of this. Let's make the vectors red. Okay, so there you can see all of the vectors have changed to red. Now I can turn this off, and what I'm going to do is go to Forest 2, and I'm going to create the vectors for this second piece. Now I'm going to do this exactly the same, but I'm going to do this a little bit faster now. So if we go to create a bitmap to vector, reduce the colours, let's bring them right the way down to 2, bring some colour back in to 4, select OK. I'm going to right click on this darker vector and link that, the lighter vector, link that, and then create the vectors. Let's switch back to the original bitmap player. Now this again has got the smaller vectors, so let's open up the vector doctor. Let's leave it at 800. Delete the vectors. Let's do node editing on this. Then the bottom here, press N as the shortcut key. So let's convert that to a line. Select that vector, that node, select that node and that node, press Y on the keyboard, again, convert that span to a line, and let's select both of these nodes and press Y. Okay, so let's move this down to the bottom corner. Now you can see that this is exactly the same size as previously. So what I want to do is make this a little bit smaller than before. So let me just move that up so you can see. So let's select all of these vectors, and what I'm going to do is go to transform. Okay, so with transform you can basically change the size of this. Now if you were to change the size and move that in, you can see that I can change the size, but it's not maintaining the aspect ratio. So if I just undo that, go back into transform, if I press shift on the keyboard, it will basically lock the height and the width. So what I'm going to do is bring that down, and let's bring it down to, let's say, about 8,900, like so. Okay, so that's a bit smaller. I'm going to select all of those vectors, and then I'm going to move those to a new layer also. So you can see this is vector layer 3. Let's rename that and call it Forest 02. And I'm going to change the colour of this to green. Okay, so I can turn that off also, so I can switch between 1, 2, turn them off. Now I need to make a third forest, and I'm just going to copy the first image for this. So what I'm going to do is just right click on Forest 01 and create a duplicate. You can see that I've created a copy. So let's rename that to Forest 03. And let's change the colour of that to blue. And just to keep these in order, I'm going to grab that layer and just drop it below 02 like so. So let's select all of these vectors. Now you can do that quickly by pressing Ctrl A, or you can right click on Forest 03 and then select all vectors. Go to transform, and I'm going to press shift on the keyboard. Let's bring this down to, let's say, about 8,400, like so. Okay, so if I zoom out, you can see, I'll just turn all the layers back on. You can see that I've got these 3 separate pieces of artwork. Okay, so let's turn Forest 2 and 3 off. And what I'm going to do now is to machine this. So let's go to Toolpaths, and I'm going to select to create a profile toolpath. Okay, so I want this to profile basically on the inside of these vectors. Now if I wanted to, I could just select all of the vectors here, but a real quick way of doing this when you have the vector tools installed is, rather than click selected vectors, select the drop down and then select the actual layer that you want to machine to. So this will basically machine any vectors that are on that Forest 01 vector layer. The finished depth, let's say 50mm. Profiling tool, I'm going to do this using a 20mm end mill. Now this is not a default tool that's in the library, so what I'm going to do is just delete this. And I'm going to show you how you can create your own tools. Now you can create end mills, ball nose, conicals, for instance, any standard tool you can create within the basic version of ArtCAM Express. If I want to create a different size end mill than the default ones that are installed, all that I need to do is select, let's say, the 12mm, and I'm going to create a copy of that. Let's go to the copy, and then I'm going to edit that. So let's change the name of that to be 20mm. Let's change the diameter to 20. Now the step down, spindle speed, feed rates, etc., you would need to get this off your tooling manufacturer and just enter the desired speeds, and then you can select OK. So let's select this 20mm end mill, and that's going to be used to machine this part. So let's select to define the material. Let's give it a material thickness of 50mm, and then I'm going to select to calculate now. Okay, so if I close the profiling down now, just zoom in here, you can see a small line that's just offset from the vector, and this is the toolpath. I can open up the toolpaths here, and I can turn them on or off by using the light bulb here. Let's rename this profile to profile 01, just so I know what this actually is. Now, the good thing about machining to layers is that I don't need to go messing around turning these layers back on. What I can do is just go to toolpaths, do the same toolpath again on the inside, forest 02 this time, select the same tool, and then calculate now. So that's calculated the toolpaths for that, so let's close that. Let's change the name of this to profile 03, and I can turn off the toolpaths. So now I've got my 3 toolpaths. Now normally what you would do is you would just go to toolpaths and then save the toolpaths. Select there to save the toolpaths. Now, because this particular job is so large, I can't do that. I need to split these up. So let's say that I've got a small machine and I need to do these in sections to fit on my CNC machine. So the way that I can do that is to select to use panel toolpath. So if I select that, what this will do, it will automatically panel up this piece into, let's say, 25, as is the case here, because I've got a width and the height set at 2000. Now if I had a really small CNC machine, let's say it was 1 meter by 1 meter, I could select create regular panels, and this would create all of the panels that I would need for this. Now, as you can see, quite a lot. I would need not 100, because this is just cutting fresh air. So let's change the way that this is ordered. So let's go a line along X, and then I can see how many I actually need. So I would need 70 panels to actually do this, because this is the last panel that I would need. Okay, so let's say that my actual bed on my CNC is a bit larger than that. Let's say 2000 by 4000, so 2 meters by 4 meters, and I'm going to create regular panels. Okay, so there you can see, split this model up into 15, and you can see that I only need 10 panels to actually do this. Okay, so it gives me all of the sizes, like so. I can also display the panel info, which is quite useful to send down to the shop floor. So it basically shows me where these panels are. Now you can see that I've got the image on there. I just need to turn the bitmap layer off. So if I just close that, go back to the original bitmap layer and display panel info now, you can see that it just gives me the image that I have on the screen. Now this is quite useful because it tells me the job width, height, thickness, where the Z0 is, gives me all of the information for each panel. It also tells me all of the toolpath data for each toolpath. Okay, so I can just print this off and give this to whoever's on the shop floor. And then when I'm happy with that, all that I need to do is go to Save Panel Toolpaths, and it will take me to the dialog box that you just saw. But this will act differently because it will cut each of these into panels. Okay, so I'll show you that in a moment. Now it won't actually generate any toolpath data for areas that it's not machining, so it's not going to create any data for these 5 panels at the top. So you're just going to have 10 panels, okay, for each of these profiles. So I'm going to save the toolpaths to separate files, and let's append the details to the file names. Okay, so I'm saving onto the desktop into a folder called Forest Backdrop, file name of Forest. The machine file format If I select under there, now these are what we call post processors. These are basically converters from ArtCAM, so it converts all of the toolpath data that's in ArtCAM into a format that your CNC machine will understand, and it will basically tell it where to go and how to machine it. Now we have well over 200 post processors in this list, and they're all available in all of the versions of ArtCAM, even the basic version of ArtCAM Express. Now, if you're unsure whether your CNC is supported, I would strongly recommend that you download the demonstration or the trial version from our website, which is artcam.com, and run through the tutorials. And at the end of the tutorials, you can actually machine the tutorial by selecting one of these post processors, and you can see if it works on your machine prior to purchasing. Okay, so let's just use a generic G code for this. So I'm going to select save, and this is going to save 30 toolpaths for me. So I've got 10 toolpaths for each profile. Okay, so that's completed. So if I open up the folder, you can see that I've got for panel 1, I've got toolpath 1, 2 and 3, and I've got 10 panels with 3 separate toolpaths. Now if I select any one of these, just double click on there, open it up in Notepad or in WordPad for instance, and it's just text. It's just basically coordinates and commands, just telling your CNC what to actually machine. Okay, so that brings an end to the demonstration. I hope that you found it useful. Many thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.